Hello, hi, and welcome back to the Here Together podcast from the Philadelphia Orchestra and Kimmel Center, Inc. This is a space where we hope you'll find a home in this art we all love. I'm your host, Khadija Mbowe, and I describe myself as a sociocultural content creator, classically trained soprano, and loving provocateur. And I'm here to facilitate some heartfelt, engaging, disruptive conversations with artists, activists, and everyone in between. That's you. The music you heard in the intro was Avant, created by our guest today, Babatunde Akinboboye, known to the millions who've seen his content online as Babatunde Hip Hopera. He's a classically trained baritone with a soft spot for art song and operatic works written by African and African-American composers. But he's also a lifelong hip-hop head.
Up until I was introduced to classical music, I only listened to hip hop. Like people were into like hip hop and R&B. I didn't do R&B, just hip hop. And so I got to opera later, and that was my first exposure to like real harmonies and dealing with music in that structure. And so I would be in rehearsals and still have opera stuff in my head coming out of rehearsals, but when I'm in my car, I'm playing hip hop. And so I would often sing the opera stuff to the beat of whatever I was listening to. And so, because that's actually how I learned my first aria. As Bartolo in Le Nozze di Figaro, I had this patter aria, and it was so many words in Italian that I had to memorize, and I couldn't get the until I set it to a beat. Then it was like, and I had it stuck. So since then, I've been kind of using little hip-hop tricks in my opera just to work on rhythms, even like melodies, and figuring out tricky intervals and stuff like that. So I came out of a rehearsal and I'm singing Figaro's aria, and Humble by Kendrick Lamar was playing, and I started kind of singing it over the beat, and it lined up like perfectly. And I was like, even all the transitions in the beat lined up with the transitions in the song, and I was like, so I put my phone up and I recorded me singing it to the beat, and I put it up online on my personal like Facebook, because I wasn't really using like social media back then. And I woke up next morning, and it was the first time I'd gone viral. I'd never experienced anything like that. And so within a week, I got a phone call from like Ellen, America's Got Talent. I got an interview with Time, and people were like, hey, do another one. And I was like, okay. So I recorded me singing another aria over another hip hop track. And they're like, yeah, this is dope. I'd buy an album of this. I was like, would you really? So then I crowdfunded a small EP of like 3 songs and put that out. And then I grew like a huge fan base. And so I was like, wow, okay. And then they started calling me the hip opera guy because the music couldn't really be called anything but hip opera. It was too easy. It lent itself to that.
That was Cortigiani from that first EP Babatunde mentioned. It was released in 2018 and is available on Spotify and Apple Music. Hint, hint. Honestly, the way Babatunde blends influences feels so natural, it's tempting to take it for granted as a foregone conclusion, an obvious stylistic evolution. In reality, getting to that sweet spot in between worlds took many years of feeling like an outsider without a firm sense of home.
I was born in the U.S. and was raised in that culture just enough to understand what was going on before I was moved to Nigeria, Lagos, Nigeria, which is the most populated city on the continent of Africa, and kind of thrown in the deep end, essentially, of that culture, if you will, and at a very formative age. So the combination of the culture shock and absorbing this new culture. And when I was around 13, I moved back to the US. And with that understanding of the two cultures, it gave me an interesting perspective of the world, especially being a Black person. And so since then, I have been exploring all the entertainment that is offered by that. I fell into becoming an opera singer on accident. And I fell into. It was, I I was pushed. I was initially pushed, and then I just kept rolling. I was in high school, and one of my friends told me, we were signing up for classes. One of my friends told me to sign up for this one class, men's ensemble. And I was like, what is men's ensemble? Because at this point in my life, I didn't know that there were classical choirs outside of the churches in Europe. Like, I knew that they had them in Europe, but I figured they were just in the churches there. Like, it wasn't a thing that was done around. Like, I didn't have a lot of exposure to classical music. And so the idea that there was one in my high school in Southern California was wild to me. It wouldn't have ever occurred. But so I signed up for the class and realized it was a singing class. Freaked out, but stayed because all my guy friends were in it and I didn't want to look like a punk. And so kept singing.
This is a very different, didn't want to look like a punk. I stayed in men's
they were
ensemble.
all there too. They were there, and it's like we were all scared and we were all like awkward, but whoever like left first would have been the one that gave up. And so we're all in there, we're gonna see how this works, and it's okay. And it was a room full of like nothing but guys, and like we're all like between the ages of like 16 and 13, and so we don't really know where we're supposed to stand, what's cool and not. Like, what are we, like, there's no leader, we're just all sheep stuck in a pen. And so we started doing it, and I fell in love with it. Absolutely fell in love with it. I was hooked. Kept wanting to sing in choir. I was like, I found out that I could sing in choir for a living. I was like, cool, professional choirs, that's all I want to do. And then in college, I was taking a voice lesson. My voice teacher suggested that I try. Have you considered opera? And I was like, opera? No, it's boring. It's weird. Like I didn't know anything about it. I was like, no. And so tried a few things vocally, and la became la. And then I was like, okay, hang on. There might be something to this. Like, okay, let's see how this goes. And he's like, yeah, there's this competition. Try out do that little competition. So I did it, and I won, and I felt good, and I was like, okay. He's like, you should apply to Cal State Northridge. They have a great vocal performance department. It's next door. Go ahead and apply. I applied, I got in, I had my audition, and they asked me and then right after my audition, they asked me to be in the opera that they were doing that year, and told me I made it into the school, and I was like, okay, this is fun. And the more I learned, the more exciting it was, and the more I kind of have a big personality, and so an opera stage felt like a big enough arena to house it, and so it kind of felt like home as well. But it wasn't the plan.
This may seem kind of weird to ask about, though, but I'm a technique girly. I love to learn about technique and singing. How does it feel for you when you're singing at your best in your body, when you feel aligned?
This is a weird analogy, but just roll with me. It feels almost like I'm I'm gonna go with, this is the only creature that's popping in my mind. I'm like searching for something else that works, and I'm getting nothing else. So imagine me like being a fairy, one of those fairies that can like glow, like there's a glow from the inside. And depending on how nourished they're being by whatever they're doing, usually their art, it glows brighter and brighter. But every now and then, when it resonates with like what it's doing 100%, it doesn't glow from the inside. It just turns into light, and I feel like my entire being just like becomes in line with music. Feels too simple. It just feels like this sounds so woo-woo, but like the creative energy, creative forces that be. It's just like creativity, which is like, I don't know, art, if you will.
Yeah.
And it feels like I'm right where I need to be, and it's just like all of me is resonating, and it feels beautiful, to keep it simple.
Sorry, that really. I love the idea of it not glowing from the inside, but just being light. It's all around. And yes. I know what you mean about it sounding woo-woo-y. But singing is, we know
you gotta be a little woo-woo to sing.
Yeah, we know the scientific way of singing, but not everybody fits with that because it's more of a feeling. And I wanted to ask that just because when you said you went from la to la, I was like, okay, because that kind of sound takes up space, not just as a singer, but as a person. And I wanted to ask you, because you have such a different background, you've lived in not like so many, but at least two majorly different places, two majorly different regions. What, in terms of you being able to take up space and find that space for yourself, Was it easier to find that home, let's say, in Lagos or home in California?
Oh, neither and both. I'll explain. I think this is a common thing that happens with third culture kids, if you will, or people who are born the first generation, where for a lot of my life, I simultaneously felt not Nigerian enough and not American enough. And so when I went to Nigeria, they made fun of my American accent. When I got back, they made fun of my Nigerian accent. And I always felt a little. And oddly enough, I think I have my art to thank, because working in classical music for so long, there's a lot of training to do things a very particular way. And you'll find a lot of classically trained artists in any field. When they try and move to like a more popular style, you can still see the classical training or hear the classical training or whatever kind of show up. And so we have that. And going from a purely classical training to creating my own art and having to, it sounds exciting being the boss and having full creative control. But it's also terrifying when you're used to having someone tell you what to do, and now you have to be that person, and you have to do all the figuring out on your own. And it requires you to fully really step into yourself and really get familiar with you so that you can bring you to your art. And in that journey, I realized that, to put it simply, that I'm correct. I'm whole as I am, like, meaning I'm not supposed to be a certain level of Nigerian, a certain amount of American. What I am is exactly what I'm supposed to be. I'm a hybrid of both, and which gives me ownership of both. I can claim both. And when I realized that, it gave me permission to fully be myself all the time. And so when I'm in Nigeria, whichever accent I'm speaking in is the way I want to speak. That's how I want to communicate whatever I communicate. My mannerisms, everything. For whatever reasons, I've been told all my life that some of my gestures can be a little effeminate. And now I'm much louder with them because it's all part of what and who I am. And as an artist, I love all the juxtapositions and all the different elements that make me more interesting. Yeah, I need to allow myself to be that loud and strong because it makes my art more pleasurable to me, and it makes it easier for others like me to find me relating to my social media.
And speaking of social media, because how I was introduced to you and how I think maybe a lot of folks that maybe are familiar with you were introduced was this viral video of you in a car. And I think, what was the question? Black people, what's a song that makes you like, that makes you go in or go hard or something like that?
What was it? It's something like, what is that white song that gets you turned up? That's what it was.
Yes,
something like that.
Okay. Yes, Black people. What is that white song that gets you turned up? And my friend, another Black singer, soprano, she sent me the video, and I just love you in the car screaming with your whole chest, the Queen of the Night aria, like, just cheering her on, like, you better hit those high C's. Let's go. It was just, I could see the joy and the love from every part of your body, and it's so beautiful to me that you've talked about having such different mixes of backgrounds and feeling like, okay, I'm not Nigerian enough, I'm not American enough, I'm not supposed to do classical music, but I'm doing classical music. There aren't a lot of Black people, so what's going on here? And you just showed up as yourself, and it just seems to have taken off.
That was one of those videos where I really was like stepping into myself and allowing myself to just be, because my reality is, because I came to opera, I was already like in my 20s when I had my first operatic voice lesson. I came to it late, so I still have the years of like the typical popular exposure to opera. Like the first time I remember hearing Figaro's aria Largo al Factotum was in the opening scene in Mrs. Doubtfire when Robin Williams is singing it as the little, he's doing the voiceover work for the little bird. And so now being in the opera world and actually knowing that, for me, I'm simultaneously like, okay, the technique of this, have to get the words, focus on my breath, support, and at the same time, it's like, hey, that song for Mrs. Doubtfire, I know all the words to that now. Yeah. And I'm living in both of those spaces. And so when I hear songs like the Queen of the Night aria, like for a lot of opera people, yeah, they're kind of tired of it because sopranos that can sing it do sing it because very often, and so we may hear it over and over and over. But for me, there's still the excitement of like, it's that one opera song, it's one epic song that sounds like it's like da, 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 da. It's like, yeah. So every time I hear it, it's still that excitement. And I figured like for a lot of us, that's probably still true, but as opera singers, we usually have to remain dignified for whatever reason. And so I like to...
Or analyzing the technique of the singer. Sorry to interrupt you.
Oh,
but that
don't get me started. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's... don't get me started. And so I could just let the excitement show and the feeling about how it feels inside when we first hear it. It's like, yeah.
So it wasn't just that video, obviously. Nothing is just one thing to get you where you are.
True.
But it was still that blending for you of two things that seem completely different, that seemed like they shouldn't mix together and make a good salad dressing, so to speak.
But they do. They do. Just like my experience being, I thought, I'm not African enough, I'm not American enough, but I exist. And it's like, maybe that balance is what it's supposed to be. And so hip hop and opera, like relating to each other in me the way it does, I'm putting it out that way because it sounds good. I like it. And it resonates with a lot of other people. I get a lot of people saying, I didn't like hip hop, but I love this stuff. Or I don't even like opera, but I love this stuff. Or I don't like opera or hip hop, but I like this stuff. And it's, I don't ask any questions. I'm just like, if it makes people feel good, I'm gonna keep doing it.
I wanted to ask you then, since you are in all of these different pots, what do you get out of performing live or performing an opera still versus making content?
Oh, yeah, there's definitely trade-offs. What I get out of performing live is it's kind of like really getting to unfurl my wings and cut. Like online, I'm regulated to 9:16. On the stage, I get whatever is on the other side of the red curtains, is all mine. Yeah. And so getting to cut loose like that, it feels like a place to roam free. That's what I get in a live performance. What I get vice versa is I get to connect with the people online. And that's something I miss as a classical singer. The audiences are typically very well behaved. You'll find people outside of opera are almost nervous to go attend an opera because they are not sure of the etiquette of an audience because there's a behavior. And so regardless how great what I do on stages are exciting or interesting or funny, I'm gonna get what I call the LaCroix version of the reaction that would normally come. Whereas when I'm online, I get to connect with these people individually and to get individual comments or videos or audio messages, and I can see. It's kind of like I get to finish in the audience. I can finish a performance and the audience forms a single file line to tell me like, oh, okay, I love this part of the piece because blah, 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 and this costume and your hair was doing a weird thing there. I don't know if you noticed that. And then I get to go with each and every person in the audience. And as a performer, I love getting to connect with the people I'm performing for. I feel like that is one thing that I'm kind of missing with, that I miss on stage in the live performance where I know they're there, but it's kind of like, being on the other side of the glass and like, hey, I'll talk to you later. Let me know what you thought or whatever.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Online, it's kind of like right then and there. It's a little more intimate.
It oddly enough seems more personal online in a way, or like
I have about a
I don't know
million
if that's
followers, and it feels more intimate than when I perform for a few thousand or a few hundred.
Right? It's weird.
It's interesting. Yeah.
Well, as a child of immigrants as well, first generation, I wanted to ask you, how have your parents or your mom received all of this notoriety that you're getting, all of the attention and opportunities, the work that you're doing? How have they received that?
Some of the tropes about Nigerian parents are true. One of them being that they're not happy unless you're a lawyer, doctor, and engineer. The amount you're making doesn't really matter. It's more about like what you're doing. So that's the way it works. There is a loophole that no one talks about. If you get famous, doesn't matter how broke you are.
Talk about it. Talk about it, because all of a sudden everything you do makes sense.
So if you're on the news, if you're on some platform that is respected by their peers, then they're good. Then you made it. So I will say that being a choir boy, wanting to be a professional choir singer for a living when I was in high school, that was a little rough on my mom, and as a result, me. Then wanting to be an opera singer as someone who grew up in especially for my mom, there was no way she could help me. There was no she didn't know anything about where to start with opera. Or even if it was like something that like was viable, like especially for someone like me, she's seeing opera, she's not seeing anyone like me, and then hearing I want to go in there, like she's gonna do everything to make sure that I'm safe, and so that was rough for us as well. We're good now. We're good now. A lot of therapy and conversations, and luckily social media is like international. So now I feel like she's allowing me to do what I want and knowing that I'll be fine, which is interesting, but I'm grateful for it.
There's a development of trust there of, okay, I may not get it, but you seem to be doing all right.
Yeah. It's like, it's almost like you're not going to end up on TV if you can't feed yourself. So
right?
That's the assumption.
The assumption.
Yeah.
So what kind of music did you listen to growing up in the house? Like what was being played if there was music?
My mom was a huge country music fan.
Wow.
She loved country music. So what I listened to a lot of in the house was a lot of country music. I listened to like the time of country music was like that All My Exes Live in Texas time. Like that was when we were listening to Bring Me Two Pina Coladas. I Got Friends in Low Places. Gonna kick off my shoes around the back streets. Yes.
I grew up in Georgia.
Woo, that's the jam. Yeah, I think
because there's some country music that I listen to and I'm like,
you know what I think it was? Because I was like, as I got older, I was like, why was this Nigerian woman obsessed with country music? Like my mom's accent is still very strong. She's lived in California for most of her life at this point, but she loved this stuff. And I think the one thing they have in common are the stories. They like stories. Country music has good stories, and stories are part of my tribe's culture. Like and we don't tell any stories without a song. All our stories have songs in them. So yeah, so maybe that's what it is. She found like something akin to her culture here, and it's like, oh, songs, stories, okay, and just latched onto those.
It's also cool too because it seems like it's nothing to do with the genre. It's just this is something that sounds kind of woo-woo as well, but Rumi, who's a philosopher, says, "Words spoken from the heart will enter the heart," and it's funny how a lot of times we will like not be interested in something, like even initially not wanting to listen to opera or something because we think we see the genre before we see what could be behind it. What emotions or stories, like you're saying, help it resonate to anyone that would listen to it if they get past the idea that they wouldn't like something just because it's X genre of music or whatever.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I think the reason it's especially in the U.S., there's well, I think just because of the planetary history with colonization and stuff, there is the element of like that history, the history between the cultures that plays a part.
Yep.
I say that because like it's like Black people's relationship to opera. It's usually because opera was and still is very much practiced as the music of the elite of Europe, and Black people in the U.S. wholly considered the polar opposite, and so there's that. And I think the same thing with like country music. I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory. The fans of country music as opposed to like and Black people in our relationship, because it becomes clear that like when music hits, it hits. It doesn't matter about genre. When we hear like an Indian song that bangs, or when Psy came out with Gangnam Style, it's like it hits. So because there was we didn't have the complication of the history or the relationships between the cultures to overcome. We just heard it and it hit. And I think it's easier to see when it's less complicated. Because, I mean, music is an emotional thing. And if there are emotions around, like I've been a big fan of some artists and then they do something problematic and I have trouble enjoying their music alone anymore. And so
we're losing some pretty great musicians that I really
it's hard. It's been hard.
Shuffle comes on and I have to stop. I have to stop. Like it comes on and I'm like, I gotta skip this because it feels weird. Like I'm like, I know that you are, and I know that's a lot of musicians probably, a lot of our composers that we love to sing. Definitely, they are not above being problematic. We maybe don't have as much evidence. And maybe that's why people say ignorance is bliss, but
for real, we're learning that for sure now.
Hi, it's me, Khadija, over Babatunde's Tanti B. We talked a lot more about music, and I'm not sorry about it. You put two singers in a room, I don't know what you would expect. But since that's not everyone's cup of tea, if you're interested in Babatunde's top 5 hip-hop tracks and top 5 arias, head over to part 2. Either way, stay tuned for our in-depth lightning bonus round. We're including it at the end of the episode as a little experiment. You like it there? Let us know. So, I have a series of questions for you. It's called an in-depth lightning round, but you can take a little time to think a little bit. You don't have to, don't feel stressed.
Okay.
I
want to see how lightning I can be. I'm excited.
I know, you looked away and I was like, look at this competitive little, okay. Correct.
That's me.
All right, first question. Who makes you laugh?
I do.
Boo!
I will literally sit in a room by myself cackling, just like literally coming up with scenarios and just like surprising myself or catching myself off guard. It's how I make a lot of my content. I was like, who makes me laugh consistently? Dion Cole.
Oh, who's Dion Cole?
Stand-up comedian. He was on the TV show Grownish, and
yes. Oh my gosh. Yes, yes.
And surprisingly remained unproblematic for all these years. But he's
we love to see it.
Like differently funny. Another guy who's like found this like element of like masculinity where it's not hyper masculine, but it's still bold, and I enjoy it.
I like that bold masculinity, not hyper masculinity, because bold.
But he's also hysterical.
Oh, yeah. I love that. Okay. What skill do you wish you had?
Oh, I wish I could draw.
Me too. Oh my God.
I wish I could draw. Write my handwriting, anything that involved like you think I'd never anything like anything I do with my right hand looks like my left hand. My stick figures are lopsided.
How do you get them even?
I don't get like the perspective. It's witchcraft. All of it looks like witchcraft. I don't get. I could watch you draw something. I'm like, how did you know how long that needed to be first before the other? Like,
or like when people are drawing eyes and stuff, and they have like dimensions.
Yo,
I'm like, what is going on here?
blows my mind. Like, how? As soon as I can draw a profile, just no eyeballs. As soon as
No eyeballs.
As soon as eyes are involved, no. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. This is good. You think it's gonna look better? It's gonna look worse.
That's fair. Okay. What's a song you wish you wrote? I didn't mean to say that so accusatory. Like, I was like, what song do you wish you wrote? Like, that was weird. Hey, what song do you wish you wrote?
Oh, My Way.
I did it my way.
That one.
That one?
Yeah, the Frank Sinatra My Way. Yeah. That song feels like I did.
Oh, it fits. Okay, everything we've been talking about, this checks out.
So much of it feels like I wrote. The first time I heard it, buckled me. Like, I'm not like, I'll hear a good song and like it and like get emotional, but this mess felt like I went into the future, wrote a song for me for like, and sent it to the past or something. Like, man, that song, every word, I was like, and yeah, oof. I can't even like think about it right now.
No, okay. I love that.
Yeah.
What is the worst advice you've ever gotten?
Oh, just suck it up.
That's hella invalidating. Like,
yeah. Because I did it. I was just like, oh, okay. I'll just go through it. Like, this situation's unpleasant and it shouldn't be this way, but I'm going to stay quiet and then I realized that my life is a lot easier if I just correct the things that are wrong around me.
Yeah.
And if it can't be corrected, correct where I am.
Yeah. All right. Last one. This is called the cataclysm sentence. So, if human beings were to be completely wiped out because of some random cataclysmic event, and there were a new batch of humans that were going to inhabit the earth, what piece of advice would you give to these new people?
In whatever you build, make sure your people come first. In whatever society, culture, institutions, all of the above, the individuals come first. If it no longer serves the individuals, it needs to be corrected or done away with or adjusted. The people will come first.
Thank you, because on that, thank you. Thank you so much for being here, for taking the time to chat.
Thank you for having me. This has been a blast.
Until next time, or until part 2. This has been the Here Together podcast from the Philadelphia Orchestra and Kimmel Center, Inc. Hi, hello, Khadija Mbowe, back for part 2 of my conversation with Babatunde Akinboboye, where we get down and nerdy about all things music. If you haven't listened to it yet, I highly suggest you start with part 1, where we cover a bunch of his biography, including how his lifelong love of hip-hop merged with his late-blooming interest in opera. Now, without further ado, let's get into the music. I want to go back, though, to you talking about being a hip-hop head, because I want to know if you have to name top 5 artists. Sorry, got to do it to you. Yep, this is an audio platform. Babatunde's eyes just went wide. He looked to his left. Not too impressed with my questions, but anyway.
Oh, okay.
I want you to give me top 5 artists that you love. And then, no, we'll do that first. I have another question after, but we'll do that first.
Okay, I'm just gonna, like, judgment free, I'm gonna go off, like, my track record and which artist was I listening to obsessively. If I know all the words to more than 2 of your albums, then yeah.
Yes. Yes.
First has to be Busta Rhymes. Busta Rhymes was...
You see how people, if you're not a hip hop head, you'd be really surprised by that. Like, because a lot of us don't listen to Busta as much. But
Busta Rhymes has been extremely consistent for a very long time. Has gave us the same experience since when he was with did the scenario with Tribe Called Quest to today. And he also gave me a lot of permission to just be like, I'm kind of like a big energy guy, and he was that way in hip hop. He was just like bigger than every room he was in. Yes. And he was allowed to be, and so I loved him for that. And so I latched onto him pretty early. So, and I won't give a diatribe for each artist, but at least I'll try not to.
Okay, it's cool.
So definitely.
Listen, you can if you want to.
So definitely Busta Rhymes. When this kind of really hit me hard when I was in class, when I first got in the choir and was doing the classical music thing. But Eminem was one of my anchors, and oddly enough, I realized halfway through it was the experience of being from a different culture and then doing music in a culture that isn't typically your culture.
Yeah.
And
I've never heard anyone talk about Eminem like that, but it does make sense to me.
That really was his experience, and I felt the same way. Like he was trying. Like I felt like we were both trying to find validation in that industry. Like, yeah, we could find it outside. Like, yeah, if he went to his people, everyone was like, yeah, excited or whatever. But he wanted, like, he was going to the hip hop radio stations. He wasn't going to K-Rock or the rock stations. Like he wanted that validation there, and that's kind of the journey I felt like I was on, like trying to figure this out. You know, I don't know I know a lot more of his story than I probably should, but I felt that kinship. And at the same time, like, I didn't have a lot of money, so he talked about being broke. I didn't have the best relationship with my mom. It wasn't as bad as his, but sometimes, you know, especially as a younger guy, he was saying the words that I couldn't say. So Busta Rhymes, Eminem, oh gosh. You know, it's so cliche to put Tupac there, but it was Tupac. Last two.
This is how you find out who you really, really love. Here we go.
You know, Ludacris. I'm definitely like a different generation. No one talks about this generation of hip hop, but yeah, Ludacris for sure. Ludacris was so refreshing and so just different. Like I can understand everything he was saying. He was so fun.
He was clear.
And at a time when hip hop was like dark, just because like life was hard. But he was just so fun, and he was still like cool, respected, and it kind of like I latched onto that. It kind of gave me permission to, okay, I can be fun, and people will still dig it. Cool. So yeah, definitely Ludacris, and Snoop, absolutely Snoop. Snoop has always been him. He's been so confident in him. It's never registered how weird he is to anyone.
I mean, it does to people that aren't in it.
But you have to think past the experience of Snoop to get like, he's a little weird.
He definitely gives me weird uncle vibes. I'm like, what's going on here?
And maybe because when I met him, he was like I don't know, 18 or something like that.
True. So, yes, I always forget he's been in the industry a very long time.
Yeah, I got into hip hop. Dr. Dre's The First Chronic album. That was my first out. My uncle snuck me the CD. It was my first CD too. Snuck me the CD, and the parental advisory sticker was still kind of new, so my mom didn't know what I was listening to. So I just listened to it, but I learned every word. I was obsessed, and I was like, "Who's the Snoop guy?" So when his album Doggy Style came out, I was like, listen to that too. And I was like, this dude, yeah. And so I've always been there. Anytime a Snoop thing. Yeah, it's. I find it interesting that like Tupac, like so much West Coast, and that makes sense. I've lived on West Coasts for most of my life, either
because I was like,
Lagos.
I don't know where Busta Rhymes is.
He's definitely East Coast, but the Tupac, the Snoop. I was trying to I was like, am I going to mention Dre just because no one really mentions Dre as a rapper? But for me, he was like one of my favorite rappers for a while. But he was my first.
Wow. Okay, I guess you were kicking up a fuss, but you actually did that pretty quickly and like pretty convincingly.
Oh, I feel like it took forever. It took forever. Honestly, I think putting me like under the on the fire, if you will, forced me to be really honest, really quick. And so, like,
love that.
Yeah. That's fun to know.
Okay, can you give me top 5 arias? Why are you looking at me like that?
I will answer that with you. I will almost never.
Oh, you really do?
I will almost
really?
Because very few people are as judgmental as an opera fan about opera.
Oh.
So if I say, if I say my favorite aria, if I say my favorite song ever is, I don't know, it could be Give Me Some More by Busta Rhymes. It may say some things about me, whatever. If I say my favorite aria is O Mio Babino Caro, it's going to say a lot more about me to an opera person. And so that's why I generally avoid it.
I know what you mean.
This is the Queen of the Night aria, Largo al Factotum, Figaro's aria from The Barber of Seville, Nessun Dorma, and I know these are cliche, but bear with me.
A bop is a bop.
Bop is a bop. It's not an aria, it's a duet. Okay. Then a Toreador's aria.
The judges will allow a duet. Okay.
Toreador's aria. Votre torche peut vous le rendre, Seigneur. That one, and the flower duet from Lakme. Those are my favorite. Those are, I think, some of the finest things that have ever been produced by opera. And this is why. Speaking personally, one of the things I think I started to lose in the way I was studying opera or classical music was the relationship with music. I started to think of the score and the notes and the rhythms and what was here as the music.
Yeah.
And I had to I took a journey all the way back to the beginning where, for me, I felt like cavemen, if you will, were around. We heard some sounds in some order that elicited a certain feeling. And we started to refer to whatever sounds that elicited that feeling as music. And I think whenever we hear birds produce a certain song or whatever, it could just be noise until it hits. Now it's music. And so we've started to call things, to this point where if we hear some good news that has nothing, it could be legal news or political news, you hear it, and if it feels good, we say that's music to my ears. We still call it, we describe it as music because of the feeling it produces. It's and I think that is what, so as soon, people that's not real music, if it does this for people, it's music. And I think, honestly, the more people, the better the music. Unless there's another goal intended with the music, but if the music was to elicit feelings and they're selling out stadiums, I'm like, they're winning. So those arias, I don't think those songs were never going to go anywhere. You can play them in any context for any people in any culture, for the most part, and it's going to hit. Out of context of the opera, you can do it on a piano, you can do it a cappella, any of them, and they're just fun for whatever reason. I don't know what it is. It taps into something on a human level. That's why they've been singled out all these years by the populace.
Yep.
To opera has this wealth of stuff, and the populace of stuff. Nah, we're only interested in those things, and because that's what hits, because they know it'll work, and it's those elements I think have been the timeless parts of opera. That opera has been sustained by those few arias. I think those are the ones that bring in the new audience. That it's just the best stuff, in my opinion, based on what I think music should be. Those songs have been the most successful in opera, and today when I hear them, they still make me feel the best. So those are why they were my favorite.
Oh, that I'm stealing that. Thanks.
By all means. Hey, we're online.
That is such an incredible way. Oh, it's an incredible way to think about that. People do say it. It's music to my ears, and it's just, but why? No one asks why, and it's you can't explain a feeling sometimes. Like, yeah, you should be able to articulate your feelings, sure, but you can't always. So, it just being a feeling. And I love the simplicity of back in the day, we heard sounds and it just seemed like, all right. Because rhythm is one of the like first, no, well, I'm not, okay. I have a music degree, but we can't go there. I'm like, I haven't time to dust off the old bachelors. But it reminds me as well of when you were going back to mixing Figaro song and Humble, and the way you were even just pounding on your chest and stuff. Like, we make music with our bodies, with our movements all the time, especially as musicians, singers, performers, all of that. It's a part of us. And it's so sad in schools, especially, how we are taught to learn music that makes it so separate from it being music, that it's just, like you said, notes on a page and measures and rhythms that you're learning. Do you have the right pronunciation? That we get so caught up in the details of stuff that the details matter, but for some people,
not
some performers, the details,
as much as we make them. They don't matter nearly that much. No. Like it's very frustrating, because I really feel, especially as a classical musician, that the score is being elevated as the music. Like, what Mozart wrote was the music. And I'm like, Mozart wrote this because it was the closest there was the closest medium he had to convey what he was trying to make happen. And so use this as a suggestion, like, oh, I got this. Like, one of my favorite things that has happened musically is like with jazz music. Jazz has like the swung rhythm, and there is no way with the tools we have with Western music notation to accurately notate the swung rhythm 100%, like where you can plug it into a computer and it'll just read the notes and rhythms and it'll catch it 100. No, we don't have the notation because it exists outside. And I feel like it's the last clue we have to show, like last surviving clue that, like, hey, maybe that isn't music. Maybe the stuff that's being created that people keep listening to, like maybe that's the music, and this stuff is just the suggestion of what that should be. Oh, it's frustrating.
Well, it's also interesting because it's like, well, the music is there, but the music is only going to do so much if you don't have someone to perform it. And I think, yeah, computers can try. I know art and AI is getting a bit scary, but
just a little.
and helpful. Some people are liking it, and some people are like, "Uh-oh, I don't like where this is going." But I really do think that like it's going to be hard to do that with music, just because, as far as I know, there isn't technology out there that can do the same thing like a human voice can, to the extent of like singing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there's something different, about muscles coming together to make a sound.
There are three things. I used to say I was raised very religious, but I'm not so much anymore. But one of the things like I've hung on to is the three things that they keep saying are in heaven that we also have here on earth are love, music, and food. And I think that it'll be hard to reproduce those things artificially in the same to the point where it'll still hit when it's done by a human. And this is not like, oh, AI is dumb. Like, I'm a big fan. Another saying, I have a bunch of sayings. Another one I love is that the only thing permanent is change. And so with like changing times and stuff like that, when I see the new, I'm like, okay, this is what I try and like figure out what it is and go along with it, because all the stuff we're trying to defend now was a change that someone else was upset about before. So if we just act like we know that, and we can get used to this, the stationary state of everything being changing in a regular and on a constant basis, then I think it'll just simplify our lives, give us a lot less grief.
I mean, I can only hope, because I like technology. I appreciate it, but yeah, I do think that there's music, and the feeling that it gives you is it's hard to describe. We're naming a very nebulous feeling. But the odd thing is I'm sure there are people out there hearing this that are like, I know exactly what you mean. And yeah, anyway, thank you for that. I'm going to be stealing that.
Please.
Thank you so much for tuning into part 2 of my conversation with Babatunde Akinboboye. I'm Khadija Mbowe, and this has been the Here Together podcast from the Philadelphia Orchestra and Kimmel Center, Inc. See you next month. Also, y'all, Don't forget to rate, comment, let us know how we're doing over here. I know everybody is asking for your attention. I get it. And so are we. Appreciate you.